trust as well.
Yeah. The prayer today is just to pray for all the poor souls in Florida for the last hurricane. So.
Barry,
take the pledge?
yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I will start by just reiterating what I had mentioned on our meeting on Tuesday. I was doing a routine check of all the different payroll funds and accounts to see how we were looking as we approach year end. And noticed that there were several departments and payroll accounts that had not had any funds taken out of them since August, basically when we passed the original resolution transferring some of the responsibilities of the payroll of the general fund to ARPA, and noticed that there was in the auditor's office, there was the ADP Contract Services Fund, the Real Estate Assessment Fund. In the Clerk of Courts, there was the Certificate of Title Administration Fund. In the Engineer's Office, there was the Road Department Fund. In the Prosecutor's Office, there was the Victim Witness Fund, as well as their Delinquent Tax Fee Fund. And in the Treasurer's Office, there was their Delinquent Tax Fee Fund. So all those were in the departments in which you passed the resolution, other funds that they had payroll coming out that had been transferred to the ARPA fund as well. So I did some very rough calculations and figured there is about 447,530 approximately. That's very general based on the previous payroll performance in those funds. So we're looking at the better part of $1 million that's probably been spent so far out of the $10 million in ARPA funds that were in funds I believe that were not intended that you guys intended to be paid for, because the direction that we had been going, the communications that I had with the auditor's office as well as our APA and the prosecutor's office were that this was to transfer the payroll obligations of the general fund to ARPA so that the cash balance in the general fund would accumulate based on the transfer of that obligation in an amount sufficient to transfer the $10 million that we had originally earmarked for the courthouse project. So after having some communication and different stuff, it was determined that we probably needed to modify or pass a new resolution to limit specifically and explicitly this arrangement to have payroll paid by ARPA to just the general fund, and then have a discussion about whether or not we should require that the funds that have been dispersed at this point to funds outside the general fund, whether or not those should be compelled to be returned to the ARPA fund.
And just to be clear, so the monies that have gone out, and that, the intent of this was that money would be then used to help offset the construction of the courthouse. The money that has gone out, theoretically, would that money then, since these are not under the general fund where the payroll's been going, correct?
Yes.
Correct. So that money theoretically then wouldn't come back to be used for that 10 million?
That's correct. So what basically would happen would be, the funds would be used up, the $10 million standard allowance would be used up sooner than we could have accumulated the $10 million in transferred obligations from the general fund.
Okay.
So I estimated that we would probably be looking at about $2.5 million for those funds in payroll. So instead of the 10 million, I would have approximately 7.5 million. So I would need to be looking, if the need was still there for the full 10 million, which I believe it would be, I would be needing to look for $2.5 million, either in the general fund, just in whatever the regular carryover would have been, aside from the $10 million, or from some other building fund, whether it's a building improvements fund or
Yeah. And that, to me, the intent of this 10 million, I know the opinion has changed over time as to how we were allowed to use that money. And, you know, early on, we were told we could use that 10 million straight towards construction, and that, you know, I guess opinion has changed, and I was okay with the idea of offsetting payroll to try and, I think, make things a little more smooth. It is a kind of a shell game clerically, you know, financially, just, but I understand some of the reasons behind doing it, but I was always under the impression this was for the purpose of general fund payroll.
Yeah, and that was pretty much exclusively my communication with both the auditor's office and the prosecutor's office.
Okay, and so since you've been asking questions, so this, our original resolution was back in August, correct? Or July?
Yeah, July.
Okay, oh, okay, July. But then we started doing it in August then, right?
Yeah, the first payrolls were,
Okay.
that were withdrawn from the funds in August, yes.
Yeah. And then when you noticed that the payroll was not going out of some of these certain different funds, and you tried to communicate with the auditor's office, and there was just no reply to this, or no discussion, or?
Yeah, there was no reply until today.
Okay. And what was the reply today?
The reply today was that the auditor's office felt that the wording of the original resolution left it ambiguous to what fund it applied to. So in their actions, they applied it to all the funds, although that's not entirely true. They are feeling that they applied it to all the funds that were among the departments that were listed in the original resolution. It seems though that the sheriff's office was not included in that.
Yeah, for example, that was my original, when I had talked to, you know, way back when I think I talked to the auditor about this, that it was potentially going to be used for something like the offsetting the sheriff's department, you know, since they're the lion's share of the payroll.
Right.
That it would be, you know, that might be beneficial to try and work out a deal with that, and still it fits within, you know, all the COVID mandates and.
But I guess to this point, if in fact he was applying it just to the, you know, those departments and all of their payroll funds, he did not do that with the sheriff's office.
No.
The sheriff's office is just having the general fund amounts paid. There are many funds in the sheriff's office that have salary line items, that those salary line items are continuing to come out of those particular funds. They did not get transferred, as with some of these other funds, to the ARPA fund.
And I just find it interesting that not one of them is under the general fund for some reason, right? Could you read those off again, those ones, which ones they are?
Well, so the departments that have these funds were listed in the original resolution.
Okay.
So the auditor's office, the clerk of courts, the engineer, the prosecutor, and the treasurer.
Okay.
All those were listed in the original resolution. But these are other funds outside the general fund in which they have payroll that they transferred to ARPA. So it was the Fund 1008, which is the ADP Contract Services Fund. 2017, which is the Real Estate Assessment Fund. The Clerk of Courts, which has the Certificate of Title Administration Fund, that's 2010. The Engineer's Office, which is Fund 2020, that is their Road Maintenance Fund. The Prosecutor's Office, which has 2061, that is their Victim Witness Fund. And 2084, which is the Delinquent Tax Fund. And then the Treasurer, which has 2085, that is their Delinquent Tax Fund. And those are the ones I've been able to find so far. I'm not saying that there might not be another one out there, so, but those were the ones specifically that I was able to.
In your estimation, we're just over $1 million so far, payroll.
Right. Yeah, it's about $447,530 approximately. That's generalizing numbers. So I'm figuring with, about 2.5 months, since we've started this, that we have, roughly $1 million.
How many, is it like close to 100 days since this went into effect?
60, no, more like maybe 75.
I see.
Yeah.
And this, one of these resolutions will correct the matter and it should be okay.
That would be my hope, yes. Yeah. I think that these resolutions are explicit enough to limit it to the payroll accounts of the general fund being transferred and not all these other funds.
Okay.
I think if you can, just to clarify, as far as those dollars that get entered into those funds, if you could just kind of explain the ability of, once those dollars go into those funds, the fact of the matter is that those funds, as far as us being able to, look at budgets and look at operating costs and everything else, those additional dollars of $1 million that got dispersed to these different funds, we do not have the legal ability of just transferring those back ourselves within that, to basically bring them back to where they are, correct?
Right, so money technically was not dispersed to these funds. The payroll obligations within these funds were actually transferred to the ARPA fund. So money that would have been used within these funds to pay for payroll is not being used for that now, so it's basically allowed to accumulate, because most of these funds accumulate money from fees and different stuff, similar to what was going to happen in the general fund. So when we transferred the $10 million worth of payroll obligation to ARPA, that wouldn't have been paid for in the general fund, so the general fund's money would have been allowed to accumulate. And then at the end of the year or the beginning of next year, we could transfer that additional money that would have accumulated in there to the Capital Reserve Fund Phase 2. So the same thing is happening with those funds that I mentioned, is that instead of payroll coming out of those funds, it's not being used for that, it's being allowed to accumulate. Now that will become essentially an unappropriated balance at the end of this year, beginning of next year, which becomes available to be supplemented in any of their accounts. Now you would still have to approve that in session. So that's something that I guess we could watch out for if we do not make those funds be paid back. But generally it would be available for them to appropriate.
Was there not, could you explain, I don't know if this is for sure or not, but was there not a request to be able to move some money out of, say capital improvement project fund this year to help offset some of the construction that was denied to be able to do that? Could you elaborate on that?
So while we were going through all the budgeting meetings and all that stuff, we had originally talked about this whole situation and about being able to move appropriations around in order to transfer money out of the general fund before the end of the year into the capital reserve fund, phase 2 for the courthouse expansion. And that was denied. That request to do that was denied. I had submitted a $10 million revenue certification that went through session here and failed at the Budget Commission. They did, this is their words, they did not want us clawing back appropriations from the various departments in order to pay for the courthouse expansion. So, as would need to have happened in order to properly fund the capital reserve fund phase 2 before the end of the year. So now I'm kind of playing a wait and see kind of game with the fund to make sure that we have enough to keep an open encumbrance and pay any bills that come in from the construction. Thankfully, the September bill is looking like it's, you know, a good amount less than what that was anticipated. So that's good news as far as being able to keep everything rolling. But I'm still, you know, waiting for that large pay request to come through, and I'm probably going to need to still transfer some money out of the general fund in order to keep things rolling. So, because I need to do a new certification on the contract, because when we initially did this, it included you know, about an $8 million certification out of the capital reserve fund phase 2, which we had managed to squirrel away and save for as the project was approaching, and then the $10 million from the ARPA fund, which was certified on the contract by the auditor's office. So that, I guess they've abandoned that, or it's no longer valid. We couldn't do it. They said that that $10 million would have been technically a payment, in payment of a settlement, which is prohibited by the ARPA fund.
And we had, you know, our prosecutor's office give us an opinion on that, and we all agreed, and I agreed 100% with our prosecutor's office, and that was not the case.
Right. Yeah, and there was an argument that could be made too, that the standard allowance could have been transferred to the general fund as the standard allowance only, and that would have been the justification for it. And then once it's in the general fund, it could be used for whatever the general fund would normally be able to pay for.
And that's what other counties are doing.
Correct. So, but instead we kind of had to go through this whole thing with paying for the salaries, and which was fine. I mean, I thought we were all on the same page until, and you know, I know some things have been said as far as, well, you didn't notice until now, but I don't make a habit of checking every fund to make sure that, yeah.
I mean, the commissioners are not oversee payroll, correct? I mean, as far as
We budget, we budget
for it,
them,
not
yeah.
distribute for it.
Correct,
Yeah.
yeah, that would be under the purview of the auditor. You know, their payroll is within the auditor's oversight. So, but as a normal part of my duties, I do check those occasionally, particularly this time of year, like I mentioned before, to make sure that everybody has sufficient appropriations to get to the end of the year.
Get through the year.
And immediately upon discovering this is when I reached out to the auditor's office to clarify what was happening. I mean, I had my suspicions. I thought I kind of understood what was going on, but just wanted somebody to tell me so that we could take appropriate action, and I could let you guys know what was going on.
Oh, I appreciate you catching it and being, you know, because,
I wish I had caught it sooner.
yeah. Well, that's unfortunate that that communication never was forthright there. So we have two different resolutions prepared today then, that you
Yes.
put together?
Yes. So, I have one resolution here, which is titled, Resolution Authorizing the Use of ARPA Standard Allowance Funds and limiting their use to the payment for government services provided only by the general fund. And then the wording that has changed in here is in the second to last paragraph, where we have added, the Board of County Commissioners approves the use of the $10 million standard allowance from the ARPA fund to pay for the salaries and benefits of employees and elected officials from within the general fund only, providing government services from the offices of the auditor, clerk of courts, commissioner, coroner, engineer, prosecutor, recorder, sheriff, treasurer, ADP, building department, board of elections, public defender, and the Veterans Commission. And then in the last paragraph, it says, we've added, the auditor's office shall then advise, and this isn't the part that got added, this is what was in the previous one, but the auditor's office shall then advise departments how to submit payroll, this is added, in compliance with this resolution, the remainder of the year for only their general fund payroll submissions. This resolution does not apply to any funds that the above offices have outside of the general fund. And then that's one resolution. Now we also have a resolution that is being considered, and this is a resolution authorizing the use of ARPA standard allowance funds and limiting their use to pay for government services provided only by the general fund and requiring the return of funds paid that were outside of the general fund. So everything else that I read before that was added is in this resolution as well, with an additional line at the end that says any salaries and benefits that are or have already been paid with ARPA money from funds outside the general fund shall be compelled by the auditor to return those funds to the ARPA fund within 30 days of the date of this resolution. So those are the two resolutions. Now those are any changes that you all want to make to either of these. If you don't like either one of them, you're free to make modifications or changes. I can go back and do that real quick, and we can.
I mean, so I just want to be clear that the money that has already been distributed, if it were to be requested to be brought back to whole, or if not, would we basically be running with a $9 million ARPA instead of the $10 million ARPA then at the end?
Well, it'd still be $10 million. It
Okay.
would just be other funds outside the general fund would have benefited from this action to the tune of about $1 million. So,
Okay.
and depending on what you all want to do, I mean, I think as long as we take this action now and going forward, it only applies to the general fund. I believe that I could find that $1 million to be able to transfer the full $10 million to the capital reserve fund.
Mm-hmm.
So now, if we had waited, it would be a different story, because then we'd be looking at close, around $2.5 million. So that would not have worked as well.
Exactly.
And every payroll would make it worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a little over 800,000 that comes out of ARPA every time we do this, and about a quarter of it is for these other funds. So,
Well,
My position is I just have a hard time with this because that was what has been communicated time and time and time again, is that we have been basically banking that we have this $10 million towards this project. And I mean, that has been pretty much, you know, the plan from the beginning. And I just think that this is not what was intended. It was never our intention to put something out there that was anything but that, you know. And you know, I feel like this is really a difficult situation, that we have supplemented a lot of these different departments, and you know, we've applied some fairly decent pay increases, you know, throughout the year. We have throughout the years, not just the year. You know, we committed to additional percentages over the course of a 3-year deal, so that people could basically have the ability of retaining and also trying to get, you know, good employees and rewarding our employees for what they're doing and the job they're doing. We've made, you know, just a lot of commitments and a lot of good faith positioning to work with some of these elected officials. That, and I think that, you know, ultimately this is in a situation where I believe the auditor's office is who's really kind of directing these funds and doing this. And I would hope that they're going to do the right thing, because I just feel that if this was done in a manner that was basically trying to add some of these accounts so that they would have additional dollars moving forward in surplus to be able to use, you know, for whatever they wanted to transfer to the following year. I think that is not what we're supposed to be doing with taxpayer dollars. And the plan from when I got here was that $10 million was supposed to be going towards that offset of salaries to be able to give us the $10 million for that project. And I think that's been, that conversation has been even, I believe it's been made public, you know, in multiple times where we've had that discussion. And I'd have to go back and you know, this kind of just fell on us, you know, just the other day, and that's why we're here trying to stop this bleeding. But you know, I think that my position would be is to request to make this right. Make this right for what we promised and what we committed to doing, which was that $10 million to go back to this courthouse project.
And I think our original resolution was pretty clear as to what the intent was. And I'll just say it, I think it's disingenuous as to what's happened. You know, I think there's been, it just pretty clear as to what was going on here.
Yeah, it's, the original resolution does mention the general fund in the last line of the resolution. So it says the auditor's office shall then advise departments how to submit payroll the remainder of the year with their remaining 2024 appropriations in the general fund.
That's right.
So I don't see, although it's not explicit above when it talks about the offices of the various departments, but it mentions the general fund. It does not mention all those other funds anywhere in the resolution.
No, it doesn't.
So, but the argument's been made that they do not feel that the original resolution was explicit in that way, so that's why we have created these.
Well, I think it's interesting is to see the ones that have had movement on it. I mean, that there is no general fund included in it. That's just kind of odd to me. I would probably lean towards a resolution to obviously make it very clear going forward that this is the general fund, and then at the same time I think we need to make this 10 million ARPA fund whole again, so we can move forward, and the intended purpose from the very beginning as to what it is. And that whatever has gone out needs to be reimbursed. I mean, to me, that's the right thing to do.
One other thing I will mention is that the resolution does say salaries and benefits, but for some reason, and I'm not sure why this is, the hospitalization has not been coming out of the ARPA fund. And this may be correct. This may be a function of the reconciliation that I do for the auditor's office on the insurance bill, but I have reached out to ask about that and whether or not there's anything additional that I need to do on the reconciliation to make sure that those hospitalization amounts are coming out of ARPA, and I've received no response. So I think it's important too to make sure that we are reiterating that this is for salaries and benefits, and somehow that we'll need to rectify that.
Is that language in both of the options?
Yes, salaries and benefits, and it was in the original one as well.
So I guess I have a question to both of the commissioners. Have you heard otherwise, or has the conversation always been that the full 10 million of that ARPA dollars was to be transferred and used for the courthouse project?
100%.
Yes, but I don't know the route that it took, so it would be for the courthouse. That was the intent, yes.
Right, that we were going to have the
Yeah,
offset.
because I doubt that
salaries.
these other funds would have been transferring money out of them into the capital reserve fund phase 2. I don't even know if legally they could do that, because those funds are set aside for certain purposes.
Right, but the offset with the salaries was going to be able to, so it's like.
For the
when we
general
started
fund,
his
correct.
conversation, it's like a shell game. Okay, we could pay this,
Right.
but we can't pay this. So we've got $10 million that we have an offset in salaries, but it gives us that $10 million surplus that we then have available.
Correct.
And I guess my whole thing is I have heard this multiple times.
Yeah.
Am I correct or am I?
Absolutely, 100%.
You're correct.
And it was always, the way it was explained to me was because of, say, for example, the sheriff's department has the biggest payroll, that we would utilize it for that.
Right.
That would probably be the biggest portion. to
Right,
utilize.
that because that would, it would be able to be consumed in a
Bigger,
bigger,
fashion.
a lot of
Quicker
counties
fashion.
in
Yeah,
less
lots of counties
amount
do
of
it.
time.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's always been the only way. Even though I agreed with our prosecutor's original opinion that he stated to us that these dollars could be used, this was not a settlement, this money was not being used for a settlement with Chardon, and I totally agreed with our prosecutor's opinion on it. And I don't know what happened to that and why we backed off of that, but I was okay with going to this other option, which is other counties are doing, and it's fine to do. But
Okay,
Yeah.
so Tim, to be clear, you've made a motion to move for the resolution that is cleaning this up with no confusion of general fund and requesting that we can figure out a way to restore that,
yeah.
of what has currently been.
I mean, that, in my feeling, that's the right way to do it. And get this thing back to square one, where it was, and then go from there. And can you read that resolution?
Do you want me to read the whole thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
the option, this is the second option.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this would be resolution authorizing the use of ARPA standard allowance funds and limiting their use to pay for government services provided only by the general fund, and requiring the return of funds paid that were outside the general fund. Whereas the President of the United States signed into law the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 on March 11th, 2021, and whereas ARPA provides money to states, counties, and municipalities to address the continuing impact of the coronavirus disease, COVID-19, on the economy, public health, state and local governments, individuals, and businesses. And whereas Section 603 created the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, which among other things appropriated monies to cities, non-entitlement units of local government, and counties to mitigate the fiscal effects stemming from the public health emergency with respect to COVID-19. And whereas Section 603, Section C1C generally provides for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue of such metropolitan city non-entitlement unit of local government or county due to the COVID-19 public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent full fiscal year of the metropolitan city non-entitlement unit of local government or county prior to the emergency. And whereas the county has received a distribution of monies from the ARPA, and whereas the U.S. Treasury has adopted various rules attached to the use of these funds, having issued a final rule on January 6, 2022, the Department of Treasury final rule published by the Federal Register on January 27, 2022 at volume 87, number 18. I'm assuming that's pages 4438 through 4454. And effective April 1st, 2022, the final rule provides in part that Treasury is including an option for recipients to use a standard allowance for revenue loss. Specifically, in the final rule, recipients will be permitted to elect a fixed amount of loss that can then be used to fund government services. This fixed amount, referred to as the standard allowance, is set up to $10 million total for the entire period of performance, not to exceed the recipient's SLFRF award amount. Whereas on April 26, 2022, through Resolution 22-053, the Board of County Commissioners opted to elect the standard allowance of $10 million. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Commissioners approves the use of the $10 million standard allowance from the ARPA fund to pay for the salaries and benefits of employees and elected officials from within the general fund only, providing government services from the offices of the auditor, clerk of courts, commissioner, coroner, engineer, prosecutor, recorder, sheriff, treasurer, ADP, building department, board of elections, public defender, and the Veterans Commission. And be it further resolved, the auditor should hereby establish the necessary payroll accounts and appropriate such funds to these accounts within the ARPA fund to accommodate these expenditures. The auditor's office will monitor such accounts and transfer appropriations within the standard allowance to ensure the use of the $10 million standard allowance is expended for these payroll purposes. The auditor's office shall then advise departments how to submit payroll in compliance with this resolution the remainder of the year for only their general fund payroll submissions. This resolution does not apply to any funds that the above offices have outside of the general fund. Any salaries and benefits that are or have already been paid with ARPA money from funds outside the general fund shall be compelled by the auditor to return those funds to the ARPA fund within 30 days of the date of this resolution.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to make a motion to approve that resolution.
Second.
Commissioner Gordon?
Yes.
Commissioner DeBoer?
Yes.
Commissioner Spillier?
Yes.
Thank you, Adrian, I appreciate you. Oh, go ahead.
And this would fix the situation that we're in.
One could argue that it didn't need to be fixed, so I would hope that it is explicit enough that there will not be any more room for this sort of
Yeah.
discrepancy.
Yeah, and thank you for, shedding some light on this type of activity that's been going on, because I think it's important, not only for us to be aware of it and bringing it to our attention, but for the public to be aware of what was going on there.
Thank you as well.
Yeah.
I think that concludes what our special meeting was in regards to. Motion to adjourn,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye. Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
Thank you.